We take it for granted that FPS games these days are going to conform to the control methods of WASD for movement and your trusty old mouse for aiming. It feels natural, intuitive, as life should be. But it wasn't so long ago when we were all using a more conventional control system, the arrow keys. Anyone who says they played Doom back in the day but can't master arrow keys in conjunction with the control and shift keys is a filthy rotten liar. This was our staple, this was how we moved, and it was, well, it had its limitations, but at least we were all on the same page. That is, until one guy changed everything. And you can change everything too, thanks to this segment's sponsor, Scopely and Star Trek Fleet Command. In this free-to-play 4x MMO, you get to dive right into the ever-expanding Star Trek universe with stunning graphics and detail. Recruit legendary characters, assign them to iconic ships, engage players around the world, and expand your territory. Available on both desktop and mobile, with a Scopely account you can play wherever you want. Plus, because Fleet Command's 5-year anniversary is here, there are now special contests, experiences, and giveaways to honour the game's legacy. Install the game today and immediately immerse yourself in the Star Trek universe with a thriving community and new immersive Star Trek story in the Kelvin timeline. Plus, use promo code WARPSPEED to get a new player content pack for free and become a Starbase commander off the bat. Check out my link below to get yourself immersed today. But before that, WASD and the mouse was already a thing. It had been used before, and some might say, to great effect. This is Dark Castle on the Sega Mega Drive, and it's a howling piece of utter shit. However, before it got there, it was here, on the Apple Mac in 1986, and the one thing the Mac definitely had was a mouse. Storm clouds, classical music, a dark castle. You find yourself in a dark room. The scene is set. Now all we need to do is navigate this place.
This is beyond any doubt the worst Sega Genesis game I have ever played.
Not like that. Our protagonist Duncan can do all the usual platform maneuvers, running, jumping, ducking, and throwing rocks at enemy faces. Yeah, maybe not too much the last one. But it's the method of control that is unusual here, or unusual for the time. WASD is used to dictate Duncan's direction, whilst the mouse can be used to aim his arm and fire. So very much like our modern day use, just in a platform game. The reason the Mega Drive version was so utter tripe pants is because it tried to port this very specific control method to a control pad. How the hell was that ever going to work? I have no idea. And it didn't. It was crap. So that's great, you may say, but in 1986 we had a solid set of controls. So what happened? Well, Dark Castle wasn't that much of a well-known game. I mean, it was on the Mac for sure, but the ports it received to other systems weren't popular and were generally inferior. Given the Mac wasn't known as a gaming platform, WASD was left to the history books. If you look at other home computers at that time, take the ZX Spectrum for example, one of the most common control layouts was to use the Q, A, O, P and space keys, wielding the full extent of the keyboard if you will. On the original Spectrum, because the spacebar was on the bottom right, you'd use the N key instead. Here, Q is up, A is down, O is left, P is right, and space is fire. It's very likely you rest your fingers on these keys on your keyboard now. Try it. It's natural, and that's what it was all about, finding a configuration that felt natural. So then, along comes the IBM PC AT and its fellow compatibles. And the one thing about the IBM PC AT is that it has a full-size keyboard, along with numeric keypad, that weird block of control keys, function buttons, and of course, the arrow keys. And here's the problem. The arrow keys were never really a comfortable method of control. When you rest your hand on them, most of your hand is hanging off the edge in midair. You have to pull your arm back off the edge of the desk. You have to really work with those keys. And really that's because they existed just to navigate Word documents, spreadsheets, and stuff like that. Not for you to pound to hell as you frantically move around E1, M1. The arrow keys were not a comfortable choice. They were a logical choice. They are directional. Games need direction. You can see the quandary. Using the arrow keys with gaming has been a staple then since the 80s. Even with the original IBM PC XT machines and their Model F keyboards, which lacked dedicated cursor keys, the numpad still had cursors using the 4, 8, 6 and 2 keys, which of course carried over to later keyboards. When AT machines came along, numeric pad cursor presses and dedicated cursor presses became essentially interchangeable. Just don't talk to me about Wang keyboards, I have no idea what's going on there. So games like Borg War, or Elite, or Outrun, or Duke Nukem all used cursor keys. If you had a joystick and a sound card to plug one into, then great, otherwise the keyboard was your friend. Of course, games towards the end of the 80s and early 90s started heavily using mouse controls too, but it was uncommon for a game to need mouse control and keyboard control consistently at the same time. More common was the need to execute some functions using the keyboard, but with your mouse as your main control. But action games were mostly keyboard, so when Hover Tank and importantly Wolfenstein 3D came along, it stuck to the well-known formula. It went a bit like this. Forwards, backwards, look left, look right. But what about if you wanted to sidestep or strafe? Well, that would usually entail holding down the Alt key in conjunction with left and right. If you wanted to move faster, you'd hold down Shift too, and if you wanted to fire, then you'd use Control. Personally, I preferred the cramped style, using all the keys on the right side of the board, but a lot of people opted for the keys on the left. Whatever your preference, this was standard. As you'd expect, id Doom was no different, and really popularised this FPS control format. From this point on, almost every 90s FPS would rely on the same set of keys. However, despite myths suggesting otherwise, Doom actually had mouse support from the go. In fact, version 1.0 of the game had it right there in the setup menu. In fact, Wolfenstein 3D also had mouse support too. It's just that most people didn't use it. The first reason that they didn't use it, especially for Wolfenstein, is that many machines didn't actually come with a mouse. If you didn't have Windows and lived exclusively in the realm of DOS, well, there wasn't much need for one. The second reason is that it's familiar. Most people stuck with what they knew. For action games, that meant the keyboard. It was just a bit weird to use a mouse in this manner, especially pushing the mouse forward and backwards to step forward and backward. It didn't feel intuitive to start with. The third reason was that Doom was a DOS game, and out of the box, DOS doesn't have mouse support. To get support for a mouse, you need to install a mouse driver upon boot, or before you run the game. Easy enough, but a mouse driver used precious conventional memory, and for DOS users, that stuff was vital. Plus, and this is important, have you seen the DPI on these old mice? It is atrocious. Playing any game which required quick movement was hell unless you had a very expensive mouse. A January 1994 Usenet survey by Richard Ward actually reported around 28% of users preferring mouse controls, compared to 61% using the keyboard and 11% using a joystick. But this was the die-hard internet-primed gamers. From a more casual perspective, I would assume it was about half of that. But actually, if you get down to it, it was clear the mouse was the superior controller, as Romero himself testifies.
Okay, so John Romero, legend, can you confirm that Doom was designed to be used with a mouse?
Absolutely. Even Wolfenstein was designed to be used with a mouse. Doom absolutely was designed to be used with a mouse. We put strafe on the mouse, the second mouse button. It's the best way to play the game. If you try and deathmatch somebody who's using keyboard only, they're done. Yeah, the mouse just changed everything.
So it makes it quicker, makes it more nimble. Everything is better.
It will beat everyone on a console if you were using a mouse and a keyboard. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Just take a look at the Doom demo loops. It's blatantly clear here that John Romero was using the mouse to record these. Whereas a keyboard offers a digital input and therefore a consistent speed of turning, the mouse is analog, which allows you to spin quickly or slowly from left to right, giving you greater control. It also allowed you to effortlessly strafe around enemies with a steady and constant aim on them, rather than the jerky controls offered by the keyboard. It's the same concept as early racing games. On a keyboard, you are either turning fully or you are not turning at all. Steering is either on or off. With analog controls, such as the mouse or modern gamepads, you get a proportionate amount of control, and it feels more realistic. But what made things feel restrictive here was that you couldn't look up and down. Doom isn't a true 3D game. This world isn't true 3D, it's pseudo 3D, and so our abilities are limited. And that's where Quake comes in. But before we get to Quake, it was again the Apple Macintosh that got there first. In December 1994, Bungie, yes, the Halo Bungie, released a game called Marathon on the Mac, featuring a full 3D world, and making use of the mouse in the process. Featuring Free Look, you could use the mouse to explore your world fully, looking up and down and left and right. The thing with Marathon is it didn't include default controls to make use of this. It's almost like the mouse-looking control was designed to be used completely independently to the keyboard controls. With Doom, it wasn't really an issue, as you could push the mouse forward to move forward and backwards to move backwards. With Marathon, you'd have to use the keyboard to move and then attempt to strafe with one hand. Using the mouse, it just wasn't simple. Some people opted for key configurations such as ASDC, with A and S to strafe left and right and D and C to move forwards and backwards. A sort of proto-WASD, if you like. But again, being on the Mac, it just didn't reach the audiences of PC or console-based games. By the time Quake arrived in 1996, you could also now look up and down, but it wasn't really necessary. Gamers had become so used to playing with a keyboard that adding look controls into the equation was just a pain. I mean, how would you even do that? Well, it turns out by using the same method as strafing, just holding down another button and pressing up and down, but it's cumbersome, and in the heat of the action that's not what you need. So, you can use the mouse. But this was still an alien concept, and you had to enable it using the Quake console. Open it up, type +M look, and then you can use the mouse to look around. It's not even a standard option in the game's menu. And to the game, this was effectively the same as holding down a key. If you wanted to play Quake on anything other than easy, this was really the only way to do it. Now you might ask why it wasn't a default option, and the reason is simple. It's legacy. It's the old adage of sticking to what we're used to. John Romero even said it himself. When we released Quake, I thought mouse look was too advanced as a default, so I made it an option. Defaulted it on a later update. It wouldn't be until Quake 2 when mouse look would become effectively default, and that's when players really started upping their game, especially in the online arena. Services like BT Wireplay allowed users to dial up to servers and engage in huge multiplayer battles. You could do this with Duke Nukem 3D, and you could do it with Quake, and you could do it with Quake 2. And the thing that happens when you have a lot of people playing against each other is some of them get good. Really good. This realm, this mixing pot of good players does something. It causes other players to come up with ways of making themselves better, of leveling up even harder, and that means taking a step back, looking at methods of control and thinking, how can I make this better serve me? That's exactly what a gentleman by the name of Dennis "Thresh" Fong did. On Monday, August 26, 1996, the Wall Street Journal featured an article about the first professional gamer. Thresh, short for Threshold, had been into gaming since the years of Muds, but it was Quake which really made his senses pop, and Thresh got good. Real good. On the 27th of August 1996, the San Francisco Examiner reported, "At the start of a recent computer tournament near here, fingers twitched nervously on mice and keyboards as 200 young enthusiasts from around the country waited for the marathon competition to begin. Suddenly there was a gasp in the hall. Someone glancing at the roster of entrants spied a name that provoked instant fear. 'Thresh!' he exclaimed. 'Is he playing?' another asked. Soon the room was in revolt, with contestants refusing to play, relenting only after Thresh agreed to withdraw. 'I'll challenge anyone to a deathmatch,' said Jason Langus, a 17-year-old gamer from San Jose who attended the June tournament in Santa Clara. 'Except Thresh. He'll kill me blindfolded.' And part of the key to Thresh's ability was the control setup he had created. In a 2019 Vox interview, he explained,
"Some people use the arrow keys, which are on the right-hand side of the keyboard, and the mouse. Some people would only use a keyboard. Some people would use kind of a horizontal row, so like ESDF. I found WASD on my left hand, and then using the mouse on the right hand to be the most comfortable. By default, the weapons, you have to hit the numbers to switch weapons.
Thresh may not have been the first, but he was undoubtedly the most notorious to land on this particular configuration. Whereas some may have preferred to use ESDF as their inverted T or even RDFG, WASD had the benefit of being close enough to the shift and control keys to use your pinky, close enough to the spacebar to use your thumb, and within easy reach of the number buttons, and for most it was perfect. People started copying and using WSAD and the mouse as their standard key configuration. Thresh was becoming so well known, not just in the gaming community but also in the media in general, that people wanted to know his secrets, and this was one that could be applied to almost everyone. This became so well known that by the time Quake 2 did come out, not only did it have mouse look as default, but you could also type thresh.cfg into the console and immediately use Thresh's control setup, including sensitivity and speed. This then was the breeding ground, and from here, it didn't take long to spread to other FPS games as default controls. So when Half-Life came out in 1998 using WASD and mouse as default, the deal was sealed. Half-Life was such a popular game that the arrow keys of old made way and WASD took over. Of course, this wasn't the end for the arrow keys. Other games still made use of them for years, and indeed still do, but their podium place was toppled. Where once they were king, they were now just an option, just like WASD had been in the past. In a full circular pattern, the arrow keys were back where they started, serving spreadsheets, Word documents, and command lines, living out their old age in peace, just like they should be. We still love you, arrow keys. We always will. Thank you for your service. Until next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo.
Oh, don't forget to check out Star Trek Fleet Command in the description.
Never was a quitter, tasted like a raindrop. She's got the look.